Grudgewood Lane looked like something out of a neighborhood brochure no one asked for. Every lawn was trimmed like it had a personal barber. Mailboxes were all the same shade of approved beige. Even the dogs seemed to bark at a polite volume. But Grandpa always said, "Give a nosy neighbor a clipboard, you create a monster." He wasn't wrong. It was around midnight when I saw it. I was in the kitchen, eating cold pizza and trying not to wake anyone, when a shadow moved past the window. At first I thought it was a raccoon, or maybe a cat. But no. This thing climbed our 6-foot backyard fence like a gymnast with a grudge. I pressed my face to the glass and saw the shape drop into the flower bed with a soft thud. Flashlight in hand, night vision goggles strapped to her face, and a clipboard tucked under one arm. It was Brenda Latch, the head of the HOA patrol committee, snooping around our yard like she was in some spy movie nobody wanted to watch. She crouched near the garden gnome, measured something, and then peeked inside our recycling bin like she was hunting for top-secret documents. I didn't say anything. I just watched, frozen halfway through a bite of crust. A minute later, she vanished into the night like she hadn't just trespassed into someone's yard, like a sleepwalking mall cop. The next morning, Grandpa sat down with his coffee, watched the footage, and didn't speak for a long time. Then he stood up, went into the garage, and came back out holding a roll of copper wire and a battery. He didn't even say anything at first, just shook his head and muttered, "If they want to play dirty." That's when Grandpa started rewiring the fence. Grudgewood Lane wasn't just tidy. It was weirdly perfect. Every house had the same color shutters, the same kind of mailbox. The grass was cut to the same height, like someone measured it with a ruler. And honestly, someone probably did. That someone was usually Brenda, or one of her clipboard-carrying sidekicks from the HOA. The Homeowners Association didn't just enforce rules. They invented them. You couldn't have a garden gnome taller than 12 inches. Your trash bins had to be pulled in before 7:01 a.m. One neighbor got a warning because their wind chimes were too enthusiastic. I'm not kidding. Then Grandpa moved in. He came to stay with us after Grandma passed. He showed up with a rusted truck, a stack of old coffee cans, and zero patience for anything that smelled like rules. Within 2 weeks, he'd already collected 3 violation letters. The first was for putting up a spinning metal windmill sculpture he welded himself. Brenda said it disrupted visual harmony. The second was because he painted his shed red, which wasn't on the approved neighborhood palette. Apparently, only 5 shades of boring were allowed. And the third, my favorite, was from a meeting where he stood up, called Brenda a communist, grabbed 2 donuts, and stormed out without saying another word. It was kind of amazing to watch. Everyone else tiptoed around the HOA like it was some unspoken law. But Grandpa? He looked them straight in the eye and did what he wanted anyway. And even though he played it cool, you could tell. He was building up to something. Grandpa watched the footage of Brenda like he was trying to decide whether to laugh or set something on fire. There she was, creeping around our yard in the middle of the night, flashlight bouncing, ruler in hand, squatting in front of the garden gnome like she was checking its criminal record. She measured it. Twice. Then moved on to poke through our recycling bin like she was hunting for FBI secrets in soda cans. Grandpa didn't say a word. He just hit rewind, then played it again, and again. The next morning, he was already in the garage when I woke up. By noon, the workbench looked like a hardware store exploded on it. There were wires, old extension cords, a car battery that hadn't seen a truck in 10 years, and way too much duct tape. At one point, he held up 2 pieces of copper and muttered something like, "This'll make her rethink her whole life." I didn't ask questions. I just recorded it for my YouTube channel. By sunset, the fence was no longer just a fence. It was a trap, a message, and a personal line in the sand. Grandpa even made a sign out of plywood and Sharpie. "Trespassers will be shocked," literally. That night, it stayed quiet. But on the second night, we heard it. The scream. High-pitched, dramatic, and followed by the sound of someone hitting the ground hard. We rushed outside and found Brenda twitching beside the petunias, her wig halfway off and smelling like she hugged a toaster. She sat up, shook her fist at Grandpa, and yelled, "You'll hear from my lawyer!" Then she hobbled away, still sparking slightly, while dialing her phone and yelling about being assaulted by a senior citizen with a death wish. Grandpa just watched her leave and said, "Good, let her call." After the zap heard round the block, something strange started happening. People who normally waved politely and went back to trimming their bushes suddenly became fans. Mr. Cho brought over a fruit basket and called Grandpa a legend. Ms. Ramirez showed up with a homemade pie and whispered, "You did what we all wanted to do." A few even asked if Grandpa could rig their mailboxes to squirt water at nosy visitors. He politely declined the trap requests, but he took the pie. Meanwhile, Brenda went full panic mode. She started knocking on doors, warning everyone about weaponized boomers, said we were harboring a rogue electrician, called Grandpa a security threat. She even wore a neck brace one day, which was weird because the fence barely had enough juice to toast bread. My YouTube channel exploded. I uploaded the footage with the title, "HOA Karen Gets Shocked, Instant Karma." And overnight, I gained thousands of views. People loved it. HOA? Not so much. They slapped us with a $5,000 fine and said legal action was being considered. That's when Sanjay Patel knocked on our door. A soft-spoken lawyer from 3 houses down, known for his bonsai tree violations. He stepped around the garden hose and said, "I've been waiting for someone to finally push back. Let's fight." Court day felt less like a trial, and more like a weird school assembly where everyone knew the teacher was about to lose it. The judge had the kind of haircut that said she didn't have time for nonsense, or hair products. She looked at us like we were already guilty, then told everyone to sit down and keep it short. Sanjay came prepared. He brought a USB stick labeled Brendagate and handed it to the bailiff like it was a mixtape. The courtroom lights dimmed, and on screen came Brenda, climbing our fence, tripping over a rake, poking Grandpa's grill with a ruler, and at one point, stealing a tomato straight off the vine and eating it. The whole room watched in dead silence, except for the one guy who quietly said, "Did she seriously eat the tomato?" Grandpa, of course, couldn't help himself. When the judge asked if he had anything to add, he stood, pointed at Brenda, and said, "She's the nosy antichrist of hedges." Sanjay immediately told him to sit down. Brenda's lawyer objected to nearly everything, including the shape of the tomato. But the judge just rubbed her temples and kept going. When it came time for the verdict, she looked Brenda dead in the eyes and said, "You trespassed," repeatedly. Then she turned to Grandpa and added, "But your fence is imaginative. You're ordered to deactivate it and pay a $500 fine for reckless creativity." Brenda's jaw dropped like she'd just found out her car was towed. Grandpa nodded like he'd just been knighted. Around the courtroom, people started whispering and side-eyeing Brenda. The shift was clear. She wasn't the enforcer anymore. She was the problem. A few days after the court ruling, things were starting to feel calm again, until Grandpa helped Mrs. Wilkins rehang her birdhouse. It had fallen after a windstorm, and she asked him to fix it. When he picked it up, something inside rattled. Curious, he opened a small panel on the back and found a tiny black device about the size of a thumb, a microphone. He didn't say a word, just carried it home like he'd found a bomb. He set it down on our kitchen table, looked at it for a long minute, then said, "They've gone full spy movie." Mom screamed. Dad left the room. Again. Word got out fast. Neighbors started checking their birdhouses, porch lights, even under their garden gnomes. Mr. Cho found a similar mic under his hummingbird feeder. Ms. Ramirez found one stuck to the inside of her mailbox. It was like the neighborhood had been wired by a paranoid squirrel with a tech degree. When confronted, the HOA said it was part of a community safety enhancement program. Brenda called it a pilot project to encourage behavioral harmony. Nobody bought it. People were mad and weirdly creeped out. That's when Grandpa said enough was enough. He called Sanjay, dragged out a whiteboard, set up folding chairs in the middle of the cul-de-sac, and told everyone, "Tonight, we hold the first tribunal of Grudgewood Lane." Sanjay nodded, holding a stack of evidence. "Let's blow this wide open." By 6 o'clock, the cul-de-sac looked like a block party with a purpose. Grandpa had set up 3 folding chairs, a cooler full of lemonade, and a whiteboard that said HOA, Forced Hidden Operations Agency, in thick black marker. One neighbor brought popcorn. Pastor Reynolds showed up with a collapsible pulpit. Even the Gomez family wheeled out their parrot, Paco, in a little cage. People took turns sharing what they'd found. Mr. Cho talked about the mic under his recycling bin. Ms. Ramirez said her flower pots had been moved. And then there was Paco. The bird fluffed its feathers, looked around, and said, "Don't talk on the porch." They're listening. Half the crowd gasped. Then the bird squawked, "Violation!" Violation, in a voice that sounded suspiciously like Brenda's. Someone nearly spit out their lemonade laughing. That's when things fully flipped. The neighborhood wasn't scared anymore. They were mad. You could feel it. The whispering, the side glances, the quiet nods. The HOA had crossed a line, and nobody wanted to be part of their game. Daryl, the awkward new patrol guy with the clipboard and cartoon villain mustache, tried to speak up. But when asked who approved the surveillance, he fake answered a phone call and walked off mid-sentence. The control they had? Gone. Just when it felt like things couldn't get any wilder, a tall, quiet man who lived at the end of the street stood up. Leonard Brinkley. No one really knew much about him. He barely waved, never came to meetings. But that night, he walked to the front of the crowd, opened a folder, and said, "As HOA president, I'm dissolving this mess, effective immediately." People blinked. Brenda nearly choked on her water. "You can't do that," she snapped. Leonard didn't even flinch. "Actually, I can. I started this HOA 12 years ago for shared lawns, not spy gear." Then he looked right at Brenda and said, "Also, I never forgot what you did to my gardenias in 2012. You rewrote the watering schedule out of spite. You killed them." The silence was so thick, you could hear someone drop a cookie. And then, cheering. Loud, real cheering. Someone popped a confetti cannon. Grandpa just blinked, then muttered, "Huh?" Not how I thought the war would end. In the weeks after the HOA was officially shut down, Grudgewood Lane changed. Fast. Plastic flamingos started popping up in front yards like bright pink mushrooms. Someone put a giant inflatable duck on their roof just because they could. Fences were painted every color you could think of. Blue, orange, even one with glitter stripes. It was like the whole neighborhood took a deep breath for the first time in years. Grandpa rewired the fence one last time, not to shock anyone, but to play music. Every time someone brushed against it, it blasted Sweet Home Alabama. The mailman didn't love it, but everyone else did. Even the dogs seemed happier. Things felt peaceful. No clipboards, no warning letters, just neighbors being neighbors again. But deep down, we all knew something would stir things up again eventually. After all, this was still Grudgewood Lane. Peace never lasted too long. Not with Grandpa still tinkering in the garage. One night, just as I was heading back inside, I heard a soft buzzing above the house. I looked up and there it was. A tiny drone, blinking red, hovering like it was watching. It paused for a second, then zipped away into the dark. Inside, Grandpa was already at the table, sketching on a napkin with his serious face on. I asked what he was building. He didn't even look up, just smirked and said, "Anti-air." I stood there for a moment, then smiled. Grudgewood Lane would never be normal again. And honestly, we were all better for it.